You think that they would have somebody intelligent on the inside that would change their lines a little bit, but it's not. So yeah, it's crazy. These companies that are worth 30, $40 billion, you think they'd be smart enough to have somebody, tweak their lines, but they don't.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Behind the Lines, the only sports betting podcast purifying the sports betting industry. Remember to like, download, subscribe, follow us on all the socials at inplayLIVE. And if you got a sports betting story you want to share with us, well, drop a comment below and you might get featured here on the show. All right. Joining me, as always, Andrew Pace, founder of inplayLIVE. And today we've got Randy Stewart on the show. He is a coach within inplayLIVE and one of the pros who is calling out sports bets on a regular basis on the live streams that you get to participate when you join the inplayLIVE community. If you do want to see what it's all about on the inside, we've got a promo code for you. That is Behind the Lines, all caps. All right, fellas, today we are diving in to the NBA. Basketball is my first love. I think I started playing basketball when I was about 5 years old. It's a sport that introduced me to sports. I absolutely love the game. But until recently, I've never really made any money betting on NBA basketball. It's always been a struggle. It's something I kind of steered away from. I was more successful in other sports, never really gained a lot of traction in the world of NBA. Pace, I want to start with you. What kind of role has the NBA played in your sports betting career?
Basketball wasn't a focus of my personal betting journey when I first started succeeding as a sports bettor. But before I was succeeding, sure, why not throw a little parlay together and throw a couple NBA favorites on there to bust it up and watch it go to zero. So yeah, I mean, it wasn't a big part of things, but it definitely became a really big part of my success before inplayLIVE actually started, more specifically the NBA, not necessarily college basketball, whereas now college basketball is a huge part of my success today. And I actually got away from betting on the NBA once I became successful, and not because you couldn't make money betting on the NBA. I think it's a tremendous way to make money, and arguably the best and most consistent way to make money of any sport. But for me, it was just a time thing, and my focus just remained more so on football and hockey and less on basketball, which very much feels like is transitioning to, I would say, gosh, you got to get a night off here and there at some point, but I would say really starting to become a 7-day-a-week thing right now, with obviously basketball firing up, which ultimately is a great thing. It gives you the option to take nights off here and there when you want to. But if you do want to quote unquote work and make money, you got it all running right now. You got hockey, you got hoops, and of course you got football. So great time of year.
Yeah, and you mentioned college basketball, which is just coming up and around the corner, and also something that we've all, I think, been very successful with. And when I say all, I mean the people within inplayLIVE. College basketball, just such a bread and butter aspect of everything we do. Can't wait for that. And we've got a show in the works coming on college basketball after that season starts. So stay tuned for that coming your way. But for now, it's all NBA. Randy, what's it been like for you? Where does NBA fit into your sports betting journey? I have a feeling like it's a little bit more of a pivotal point of success for you than maybe Pace or myself.
Yeah, a couple things with NBA. I like NBA and I like college basketball because it caters to my schedule. My schedule is, married. I got a 7-year-old. I have a 5-year-old daughter. Weekends are very, very busy around our house. As you know, it's hard to just take time off all weekend. So I love football, but it's not as easy to be glued to a computer on Saturdays and Sundays. What I like about basketball is Monday through Friday in the evenings. Set aside an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, depending on your strategy and your time commitment. And you can make really good money with basketball, whether it be NBA, whether it be college basketball. So if nothing else, just from the time frame alone, like in September is a little difficult. I wouldn't say difficult, but schedule wise, the brunt of our work is on the weekends. It's on Saturdays. It's on Sundays. So I'm kind of just waiting sometimes Mondays and Fridays throughout the week where I like to spend the most of my time betting on sports. There's not as many opportunities, but basketball season, there certainly is. So my goal is to make as much as I can Monday through Friday. And then when the weekend comes, try to take a step back, be selective when I come in, when I come out. So I love the schedule that it provides, but just opportunity wise and kind of my success has really started with basketball. It actually started with European basketball and some of the overseas stuff, but a lot of the strategies that I use for basketball carry over. So what started with the European League, I started to use on college basketball and on NBA, and a lot of those still work. So but that's really where I got my start, is on the basketball standpoint compared to other sports.
Wow. Okay. I love that. Basketball as kind of the working man, the family man's game to bet on, sort of fits into that nice little box of Monday to Friday evenings, right? Absolutely. I love that. All right. Pace, how would you say NBA is different from other sports when it comes to betting, aside from the scheduling aspect?
Right. So basketball is the highest scoring sport. I mean, I don't follow cricket, or I don't know how that sport works at all, but it's the highest scoring sport in the world. So forget about the NBA. You're going to see the most amount of points scored per second, per minute, whatever, in basketball in general. And then the NBA is the highest scoring of all the basketball leagues. So the level of talent and skill at the NBA level provides a higher points per minute than all the other leagues. So what does that mean from a betting standpoint? Well, I think that you're going to get a lot of variance when a lot of that stuff happens. And the more variance that occurs within sports books presents a lot of opportunity from the standpoint of potential middles, potential arbs, all happening in real time. But then obviously a lot of dangers, because you might be looking at two sports books where one just didn't update yet, and the bet that you were seeing or thinking is a middle or an arb just simply hadn't updated yet. And you ended up uncovered on a wager or stuck on a wager because you thought you had a middle or an arb that actually wasn't truly there. Or there's this thing called spooling that the sports books do, where your bet doesn't place the second that you place it. And it might be 6 seconds, it might be 30 seconds. And if you've watched the NBA, 30 seconds, you can see potentially 9 points, maybe even more, just in that one little period of time. So while you were sitting there spooling, the books may be sitting there on the other side going, this person just spun in an under. There's been 6 points since he spun it. While we're spinning, we have the option to now spin him into that bet where you've almost lost it before you've even placed it. So there's definitely a lot of opportunity from the standpoint of all this high scoring that occurs. But then at the same time, a lot of risk associated with if you're doing that in real time, and especially if you're doing it based on what you're watching, because I would say that the NBA is the single hardest sport to get a live feed on. So it's really hard to actually watch the game and watch it quick enough to match the books and how quickly they're updating.
Right. You're getting at the topic of latency, which we've covered here on the show before. And if, everybody was wondering what that means, I encourage you to go back, find that episode of latency from a few months ago, and to really understand what it is that we're getting at there. But Pace, what you're kind of saying here then is that latency in NBA is exaggerated even more than it is in other sports.
Yeah, well, if you have a 40-second play clock in the NFL, even if you run hurry-up offense, you're usually snapping the ball with 20 seconds left on the play clock. So there's 20 seconds between plays. If you have a good broadcast, you've probably seen the play within the one play. Whereas in the NBA, if you see 3 threes and fast breaks and all the things that can happen so quickly in that sport, you could end up being 3 or 4 baskets behind with a good feed.
All right, Randy, over to you. Pace brought up a topic here that I think needs a little bit of explanation or elaboration on. And so he was mentioning arbitrage, which we've covered sort of pretty extensively here on the show, especially back on our Pinnacle episode where we had a whole tool to show off how to calculate arbitrage, which is a fantastic tool that you can also find on the inplayLIVE website. But he also brought up this topic of middles and middling. Randy, can you explain for everybody out there who might not be familiar with the term and is wondering, well, what the heck does that even mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're middling, you're placing a wager on two different outcomes. So typically, like let's say a game total over and a game total under. There may be a site that has a game total at 204.5 and another site that has a game total at 208.5. In that situation, you're taking it over, you're taking it under. If it lands in the middle, you win both. If it lands outside of that, all that you're losing is the juice or the commission on that. So that I I really like basketball because the pace I mentioned the variances that you'll see in basketball, but you'll get the books will give you a lot of different options for alternate lines, so you can really basically take a middle. You can make your own middle basically. So whenever you see an opportunity where there's 4 or 5, you can take alternate lines where you're getting different juice to make the middle essentially free if you want to. If it's football, for example, and there's a middle, you'll middle around common outcomes like -9.5 and +10.5. But sometimes you don't have the chance to take an alternate line. So the only middle that you're taking is if the book is in the main lines, if there's a middle. But with basketball, there's just so many different markets that you could bet on. For example, if the game total is 207.5, you can go into a particular book and take it all the way down to 200 or take it all the way up to 220 if you want to. So you have the ability of basically paying whatever juice you want for whatever over or under you're at. So it makes it a lot easier for somebody who's middling. Or somebody who's using arbitrage to profit from.
Right, and you can also do that with the spreads too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So another example for a spread would be if one book's at -11.5 and another book's at +14.5. Same thing. You would take a wager at the -11.5 and then you take another wager at the +14.5. And with basketball, it's so fast paced that I think you see a lot more opportunities. It's not unusual for a team to go back and hit 2 threes, and a book's going to overcorrect on a spread, or they're going to overcorrect on a total versus another book. So the being fast paced, there's obviously things you have to do to not get stuck on one side. But I think the speed of the game alone creates the middles and creates the opportunities that we see that we love to be able to bet on.
How important has the strategy been to your sports betting success?
So the first this is my 4th year now gambling, and
you don't gamble, Randy.
I don't gamble. Sports investing, and the first 2.5 years, there truly was not a gamble. The first 2.5 years, every single bet that I placed was a middle. So I literally did not risk anything. So I was well up into the 6 figures alone just on that strategy. It wasn't before even I joined inplayLIVE that I placed my first intentional unhedged or unmiddled bet. So I mean that alone gave me the foundation gave me the bankroll and the confidence to be able then for our high ROI strategies to get out of middling a little bit. I still certainly middle a lot, but it gave you the bankroll to start, really increasing your unit sizes. I know a lot of other members and a lot of other people that no longer middle. They built their initial bankroll by middling, which is a great way to do that, especially when you're literally risking very little, if any, money at all when you're doing that right.
And for all of you out there listening and you want to learn more about this, I encourage you to join inplayLIVE. Come on in. Randy's got a whole course on middling. It's really extensive, and he really walks you through how to create what he calls these free middles, which is essentially not paying any juice on either side. And here you are, you've got a bet and you've risked nothing for potential to sort of hit an enormous wager, which is really something to behold when you watch him do it in action. And it's pretty cool, Randy, I got to say.
It's like I said, it's a tremendous way and just to get going. I mean, I know there's a couple other people. I was talking to somebody earlier this week. I actually did some coaching to him back in April, and he was at about $25,000 of profit, and had some success back and forth. And going into the beginning of October, he was at about $30,000 of profit, and he's very dedicated to middling. He does not get interrupted. He sets dedicated time aside to middle. And in October alone, he more than made up all that he did in January and in September. So he's up like $35,000 alone just in October from middling, and a lot of that was preseason basketball. So it's tremendous. He pulled out some money. And he was using some for a down payment for a house. So it's just great to see a strategy like that that's working, and able to, provide back to his family, all from a strategy that, he dedicated himself to, and that is his focus. So it's great to see and hear success like that.
Love hearing that story. Look at that. This guy, in a month's time, has been able to create enough wealth for himself to put a down payment on a home, something that will continue to appreciate well into the future. So he's winning now, getting the home. He'll be winning for years to come. I absolutely love hearing stories like that. Okay, let's move a little bit away from middling and pace over to you. You've seen a lot of sports bettors come through inplayLIVE over the years. You've talked to them, coached them a little bit. What are some of the biggest mistakes people are making when it comes to betting on NBA basketball?
Oh man. Well, the NBA is tricky, right? Because I think with any sport, you have this sort of like they can't lose mentality. And when the season starts, you're really trying to get going as a team. If you're a poor team in the NBA, you're trying to prove yourself and win some games. And if you're one of the top teams in the NBA, early on, you usually have some pretty good games, some real tests early on that you want to go perform well. So the motivations tend to be pretty clear at the very start of the season. Everyone is out there to win basketball games. And that seems like common sense. You would think like, okay, we're going to progress throughout this season and we're going to keep winning games. Well, the motivations do change. The motivations can turn a little bit more towards your longevity in the season. An 82 game season is obviously nothing it's serious. We've seen serious injuries year in, year out, from marquee players. And, if Nikola Jokic is hurt, are the Nuggets going to win the title this year? They might, but I think the answer is no. If Steph Curry gets hurt, do the Warriors have a chance to beat them? I don't think so, right? So it's very much a season of managing, the overall risk to your players. But then on top of that, with it being this elaborate 82 game season, and we've seen the Miami Heat as the 8th seed go to the final, and we've seen the Warriors win the final, coming in as the 6th seed. There's less focus on that 1 seed now. It's important. I don't want to undervalue being that 1 seed, getting that home advantage throughout the entire playoffs. It means something, but more important to that is this longevity and sustainability of your team, especially with a lot of these big stars being veterans in the league at this point that are some of the big names and the big brands across the league. So in order to see them late in the playoffs, they do have to be healthy for their teams to actually win and succeed. So there's a major trap that can be set on any given game that you can't necessarily pinpoint in any easy way, shape, or form. And it is precisely that, when a team that you think is out there to go win that basketball game actually doesn't have the full motivation for that one particular game. And that can lead to resting a player in the middle of the game, resting him before the game starts, that maybe you didn't know about and even the sports books didn't know about yet. And you bought a bad line because that player ended up not being in the game. And then everything to do with gambling, right? Like chasing, obviously, big favorites, bad bets, chasing your losses, all those types of things that exist across the board. And people love making these basketball parlays with these big favorites. And time and again, these underdogs obviously show up and win, especially in the middle of the season, especially when you got teams on back-to-backs, traveling on that day, like a big travel day, and back-to-back travel days, playing on the road. And factor that in with potential load management. There's a lot of traps to be set out there from a betting standpoint that everyone should be aware of, and that's quite honestly why I bet live. It's the same thing. It's the same thing for every sport. It doesn't matter. Time tested and proven. I don't give a fuck who's in the roster. People are like, oh, but he's not playing or he's not playing. I don't care. I got to turn it on. I'm going to see if he's on the floor. I'm going to see how they're playing, right? So that's why I love betting live, is because it's based on what you're actually seeing in that game progress throughout the course of the game. And then when you really factor in some motivations and some ways that you can exploit sports books in certain circumstances on top of what you're seeing, that does have some sort of level of consistency to it, that's where you can go, okay, I'm locked into this game. I'm getting the opportunities that I was looking for and hoping for, and it's all coming in line with the strategy that it is that we're deploying, and now's the time to capitalize.
Love that you touched on so many key things there about the NBA that make it unique, which is, yes, this is a league built on superstars and super teams, right? More so than any other league out there. We've seen, superstar players like LeBron James, for example, like a Steph Curry, like a Kawhi Leonard, like a James Harden, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving. I can go on and on. These guys who sort of get together and, decide they all are going to play at one particular team, or, in a particular city, or want to play together somewhere. And, they form super teams. The whole concept of super team is something sort of, I think, born from the NBA. And it doesn't really necessarily exist in a lot of other leagues the way it does in the NBA, and that culture of, bringing together the best on a single team to be dominant. And then this aspect of load management. Well, those superstars, they can't play every night, and maybe, one night one plays and another night, another one plays, and someone gets rest. And I know the league also looking at bringing in, some regulation around the topic of load management. And maybe you can't take a player can't just sit off a night if that game is in prime time, because these things have made fans upset. They pay the ticket prices to go and see these games. So I think these concepts are something that are very sort of unique to basketball alone. Randy, when it comes to betting on sports and what you've sort of seen from recreational sports bettors, or people who are trying to transition from being recreational sports bettors to professional sports bettors in your capacity as a coach, what are some of the most common mistakes you think they're making?
Yeah, I think, Pace always laughs at this, and I think a lot of us do, when somebody says that this can't happen, or this is so obvious, you have to take that. And I always laugh, because it's like, who are we to say that we're better than the Vegas odds makers on determining the over-under for this person's points. So someone says, well, they scored more than 30 in the last two games, so they got to be over 26 and a half. And it's like that they didn't take that into consideration. So the recreational bettor, and I think I said in the last episode, I don't call pregame. I was probably one of the worst recreational bettors. I would just figure out whatever, this doesn't make sense pregame, and I would take it. And then there's a reason why, the odds were what they are. So I think when you're recreational, you're trying to do what's obvious, and the pros do the opposite of that. So I always laugh, when someone asks me who's going to win a game. I never predict. I never act like I have a crystal ball. Frankly, when it comes to trying to predict an outcome, I'm awful at it. But what I am good at doing is saying, okay, well, the total is at 212 on three books, and one book has 216. It doesn't take a genius to say that 216 is probably an outlier. There's probably a lot of value, so there is value there. So that's, that is what I'm looking for. And when there's value in any time that you have, the odds in your favor like that, you're going to win over the long term.
Yeah, and I guess that you find that works, right? Identifying those weak lines, you hit those weak lines, and how often would you say they pay for you?
So when I'm looking at a weak line, I'm typically going to take a weak line if I have a 10 to 15% edge. So typically, and it is very common to find over the course of a night, you probably find at least a half dozen to a dozen opportunities where you're taking a line that's going to win 60 to 65% of the time at normal juice. So when you're finding that, you're going to be very well. You're going to end up very well in the over time. But typically, like when you're middling, from the middles that I hit, I'm hitting probably about 1 in 4 that I see. So high quality middles and weak lines are two really good ways to go at it. That work out really well.
Love it. All right, Pace, you only bet live. You say that all the time. But is there any value pregame betting on NBA? And then when you are betting live, you have a very specific way to approach the game of basketball, and I want you to explain that.
Yeah. So, I mean, from pregame, there's probably so much value in NBA pregame. I just don't want any part of it. It's just going to impact what I'm doing live. So, I can give you some insight on a couple of strategies that I used to do in the NBA. And I touched on this at the beginning about how NBA actually didn't become my focus once some things had changed. And it wasn't that you couldn't make money there anymore. It was just a balance thing for me. But I'll give you an example. So big Golden State guy. So Golden State's broadcasted a lot of times. And again, this isn't about fanship. This was about me knowing that team really, really well. And I just lock in on Warriors games. And I knew exactly when Steph Curry would come out of the game, and I know exactly when he'd go back in the game. And it's like clockwork. And it's actually interesting because a lot of these top players, they might not come out in the first quarter and score a lot of points. And it isn't that they miss their shots. A lot of these top players, they'll spread the ball around early. They'll give some looks to some players that they want to have a little bit of mojo and confidence when the game's on the line later in the game. So they're getting them their touches and they're getting them the ball. And Steph Curry predominantly scores the majority of his points in the third quarter. So when it comes to the actual player prop markets and the longevity of the entire game, well, it's an algorithm that is based on time. So let's say that his pregame total of points is at 24.5, and he hasn't scored much in the first quarter. Well, the total just keeps coming down and down and down, but he might not have actually put the ball up yet. And it's come down, and it shouldn't go up. It shouldn't stay the same. But if you have that type of information where you go, okay, now we're in a really good situation where maybe the game's tied, maybe they're up a little bit, or maybe they're down, but they're not being blown out, or they're not blowing their opponent out. They might need to rely on him a little bit more. He might need to be the guy that is most involved, during these next two quarters. And maybe he is actually having a good shooting night, despite being below his point average per minute in a game. So that was something that I would pretty consistently look at and do really well with. And that opportunity absolutely exists to this day. Really knowing the team, really knowing the players. And then as a result of that knowledge, then capitalizing on the discrepancies in the averages. And I'm not talking about what Randy referred to. Oh, he scored 30 the last two. He's got to go over 25. But maybe being able to get him at 18, right? You go, he hasn't put up the shots yet. The situation's really good. We know we're going to need to rely on him. I watched him drop 3 threes in a row last night, 9 points in 1 minute. And it was spectacular to watch. And that's the beauty of the NBA, right? You watch the talent level of some of these players where, aside from a soft line, aside from winning or losing, didn't even have money on. I had the under in that game. He scored 9 points in a minute. We won the under, thankfully. But watching that go down, it is just remarkable. And that's where the team needs him the most, down the stretch in the end of the game. So that's where you're going to get potentially really good opportunities on some of these superstars. It's not contrarian at all. It's taking an over for a major player live based on the situation in the game. And you can do really well with that. But the other thing that I used to look for was, okay, Steph Curry's coming out of the game, but not just, you just keep going back to Steph Curry. He's come out of the game. Get all the games on in front. All these guys have just come out of the game. I could bet on player point unders when they went on the bench for 6 minutes. And then I could bet on their over 2 or 3 points lower when they came back, as if the time was stagnant still and they were on the floor. They're not even on the floor. So I'm getting a way lower number when they came back on the floor. I think that loophole is gone now. Maybe some books still have it. Maybe it's a point lower and it doesn't make sense. But I remember sometimes getting 4 points lower after they had just simply been on the bench. So and that's different from foul trouble. Like that's one of the things. And then the last one that I used to do quite a bit was in the fourth quarter. I just look for games that were 30 points or higher, 30-point differentials or higher. And then I'd literally just blindly take the team that's down 30 points to cover the spread, especially if they were a big underdog pregame, because you might have a Milwaukee Bucks type team playing, someone really poor in the league, like the Houston Rockets or whomever it's been. And it might be like a 15 or 18 point pregame spread. And then they're up by 30 or 35 points or 40 points even. And all the starters are out of the game, and the underdog's covering the spread, and they're trying to play still against like the 4 strings of their opponent. And that hit at well over 70%, but again, is something that has largely been corrected. So we look at those types of things constantly within our group at inplayLIVE on how you can succeed in this sport long term. and looking for those opportunities and playing situations. And if then you listen to this and you go and you take these strategies and go, oh my God, I feel so excited to try this player prop thing that I heard about this guy who makes a bunch of money betting. I'm going to go give it a try tonight. Start taking all these overs on all these superstars, you're going to get absolutely smoked. So you have to set out a set of parameters that actually even allows you to even look at the game in the first place. And then you go, okay, now I'm looking at this game. It's caught my attention. I am engaged in this game, in this situation. Now, what are the other parameters that I need to actually check off to place this wager? Does he need to be shooting at a certain percentage in the game? Does he need to be having a bad game and hope that it turns? Does he need to be having a great game but just hasn't had the looks yet? Does he need to be below his point average per minute? Does he need to be above it? These are all the things that come into making an actual wager that isn't some covered middle or arbitrage wager that gives you confidence in theoretical value over the long term. And the opportunities with that in the NBA, they're not like oh, here and there. They're constant.
Yeah, you have so many great pieces of advice in there for all of you out there who are listening or watching us. I mean, and so much to kind of dig into there. I love that you brought up those Steph Curry from last night, because man, those 3 threes in that minute were just nasty.
Yeah.
Like, you saw how he just shaked the one defender with the behind the back and drained the one, comes out doing the whole scary face thing. Oh, man, he's so much fun to watch, that guy.
Yeah.
Absolutely loved that moment, even though it was going against our wager. And hey, who cares? We still won our wager in the end. So it was all fun and all a good time. Okay, Randy, Pace talked a little bit about parameters and making sure that you have, a defined plan in place. What does a successful NBA season look like to you right now here in October as we kind of, embark on this season?
I think it's just continuing to be selective. I mean, the opportunities that I'm seeing right now in basketball are as many opportunities as we've seen in future years. So the opportunities are endless. Obviously, there's other obstacles that we continue to deal with, right? And the books are always trying to play games with you. So just navigating the difficulties of the books. So thinking forward, planning the books right. Knowing the books that are continuing to give the best opportunities, continuing to use those books throughout the season. If I can continue to do that, which you have to have a plan in place to do that, and that's a discussion for another episode, then I'm going to still be able to just print money really all throughout the season. So it's having the infrastructure, I think, in place to do that, and having a plan. It's crazy. The books that the gentleman that I was mentioning earlier that was having all the success in October, it was with I won't name a book, but it's one of the books that we've been exposing year after year. And you think that they would have somebody intelligent on the inside that would change their lines a little bit, but it's not. So yeah, it's crazy. These companies that are worth $30-40 billion, you think they'd be smart enough to have somebody tweak their lines, but they don't. So the same opportunities in the same places that we've had for years. So yeah, a successful season for me is continuing to have the books available to progress through and do what we've done in the past.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting, because it's not about the strategy, it's not about the execution, it's actually the ability to even do it. That's the sustainable aspect of it. And he's referencing books limiting him, right? So that's definitely a major factor that comes into play with all successful betting.
Yeah, knowing your books, which we've talked about sort of extensively here on the Behind the Lines podcast. That's what it's all about, knowing your books, and in a lot of ways, knowing the odds provider behind the book. Randy mentions 30, 40, million, billion-dollar company, massive companies, but at the end of the day, they're just outsourcing their lines anyway, right? They've got somebody out there who's just providing the lines to them, and they just hope to make money over time. And with a whole bunch of recreational sports bettors out there making a ton of bad wagers, they probably are still turning a nice profit on it, right? So it works for them, and it works for you too, right, Randy?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's they'll change over time, and they'll try tricks to limit you, but you just have to have other tricks up your sleeve as well, which we certainly do, and we have some strategies inside of the group. So yeah, it's a game of cat and mouse. So just as long as you can continue to be a mouse and not get caught, to be right.
Exactly.
I thought I was the cat, Randy. Jeez.
Okay, guys, wrapping up here. If you had to give one piece of betting advice to a complete newbie who's like, I've never bet on basketball before, how do you do it? And you've got 30 seconds to give them a piece of advice. Randy, go ahead. What is it?
I think it'd be the same piece of advice as other sports. It's probably do the opposite of what makes sense to you as a recreational bettor.
Great contrarian thinking there. But Pace, you said earlier that sometimes you don't even have to be contrarian. So what's your number one piece of advice to somebody who's brand new to all this?
Use two separate sports books with two different odds providers. Wait for timeouts for absolutely every opportunity that you could possibly bet on, and take as little risk as possible to watch your success grow over time. And I will just add to that, because of our last episode, we had Alex on from Odds Jam. We do an Odds Jam screen share for hoops Wednesday and Friday nights. Randy's a big part of those live streams that we host that's actually on our inplayLIVE Pro platform, which is an added tier that can be added to your inplayLIVE members platform membership. When we do those screen shares, it allows a consolidated version of all the sports books, so that you can see those discrepancies very quickly, very easily. And that allows for you to uncover soft lines, middle, or potentially arbitrage some of these lines. And if you are interested in the Odds Jam platform, you can get a 15% off discount in perpetuity using the code inplayLIVE15, or you can get a 35% discount on your first month using the promo code inplayLIVE. Regardless of the two that you use, there's also a 7-day free trial. So you can check out some of these discrepancies in these sports books, which I believe basketball to be that sport that really is going to make they're exploitable across the board, but the most exploitable in basketball. But I would say use two books and compare the lines to find value. That would be the simplest form of things. And join inplayLIVE.
Of course, exactly. And two books minimum. If you can get more, better. And having Alex on last week, I encourage everybody to go back, have a listen to that episode if you really want to get a sense of, where the sports betting industry is at and what somebody who is really sort of, entrenched in the industry is seeing out there. Alex Monahan, CEO and founder or co-founder of Odds Jam. Just a great chat with him last week. So go back and have a listen to that. All right. Coming up in the next couple of weeks, we're going to do a little bit more NFL football as we sort of approach halfway mark here. And as I've been promising, I'm very, very excited to talk about college basketball, college hoops getting underway in the next couple of weeks. So we got a couple more very exciting episodes ahead in the weeks ahead. And I encourage all of you to come back and join us for those. Until then, guys, keep eating those books. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Behind the Lines. Remember to like, download, and subscribe. We are on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and everywhere you get your podcasts. Have a betting story or want to be featured on our podcast? Drop a note in the comments below. And if you want to join inplayLIVE, use promo code Behind the Lines.